Welcome to the walkthrough for the positive negative calculator. This particular roulette tool monitors the outside bet areas, such as the even bets and the dozens and columns. Let's have a look at a few of the settings here. So the evens and dozens with minimal progression is the setting that's currently set to default. This will monitor all of the even and dozen sections and adjust your betting stake to keep it as low as possible whilst always leaving you in profit when your selected number comes in. The dozens only eliminates all of the even bets, which you generally need to martingale to stay in profit. So this would just focus on the first, second and third dozen and the bottom, middle and top column. And again, that's with the minimal progression. The dozens only with the faster progression will increase the bets a little bit faster, that will give you a bit more profit, but it's more risky. The evens and dozens martingale all bets is quite a risky strategy. You will be martingaling every single bet on the even sections and the dozen sections. And if you're doing this, it would be a good idea to set the starting depth quite high. So I'm going to talk about the depths now. So as I mentioned, it's going to monitor the even bets and the dozens. So if we go down to here, you can see we've got positive tracking, and that's on the dozens, positive tracking on the columns, and then we've got the negative tracking, which will focus on the dozens, columns, and even bets. And it's always got the option to start betting at a depth of. Now you can adjust this down here, and that will wait for that particular section to have not been landed on for a particular amount of spins. So if we set that to 4, I'm just going to enter some dummy data in now so you can see what we mean. So let's just say number 4 came in, then it went to 17, then it went to 5, and then it went to 28. If we scroll down, we can see that you can see the actual tally here, which shows you the highest value that each section has gone to, and that will keep updating throughout the entire session. This is the current data where you'll see the positive tracking. Now it's saying that's at a depth of 4. I will talk about the positive tracking soon, but I'm just going to cover the negative tracking. The negative tracking looks at an area that hasn't been landed on in a particular number of spins. You can see that the top row has highlighted blue. This means that that criteria has been met from the settings that you set here, start betting at a depth of 4. This means that that top row hasn't been landed on in 4 spins. So you can see here, number 4 wasn't in the top row, number 17 was in the middle row, so that missed the top, then number 5 was in the middle row, and number 28 was in the bottom row. If the next number that came out was number 15, that would then disappear. But let's have a look at the starting bet here. This is more of a guide, but if you follow along, you will always end up in profit. So the starting bet, we've set to 1 unit. Now for the positive tracking, this is actually the monetary value, which we will talk about in a minute. For the negative tracking, this shows you the unit size. So if your unit was 20 pence or 20 cents, you would just do 1 click of that particular value. If that said 2 and the default stake was 20 cents, you would be betting 40 cents because it would be 2 units. So this isn't the monetary value, this is just how many units you would be placing your bets. So if we have a look down here, you can see the different sections, like the top row. So let's say we enter in the top row, say it went to number 12, your bet would have been 1 unit on that section, and you would have taken 3 units, so you would make 2 units profit. Let's say it does miss and it went to number 26, it's going to remain highlighted and you're going to see that the unit size has gone to 2. Unlike the even sections where you would need to martingale, the progression is a lot more mild on the dozens. So let's say it went to number 31. Instead of betting 2, you'd be betting 3 units this time. But you can also see that the second dozen has now highlighted because that second dozen hasn't been landed on in 4 spins. So you can see there. And then you'd be at bet number 1, and that would be 1 unit, whereas the top row would be 3 units. Okay, I know it's a lot to take in, but bear with me, it does all make sense. So let's say number 18 comes out and that clears both of them out. That's a negative. You can see now it's gone to the first dozen, as that section hasn't landed since it was here, which was number 5, which means it's met your criteria of missing that section 4 times in a row. For the negative tracking, I recommend analyzing the table, especially if it's an auto table like an air-powered table, and you want to track that for quite a while and then monitor the values here, and then you just want to adjust the start betting depth at to 1 or 2 numbers below the highest amount. This is the way I found the most success using this tool. Now this is the negative tracking. As I mentioned, this looks at areas that haven't been landed on in a particular duration of time or spins. The positive tracking looks at how often the ball doesn't follow itself. So let's say number 18 went to number 20. That means that's in the same dozen. So 18 is in the second dozen, number 20 is in the second dozen. So you can see that the positive tracking on the dozens is now 0. If, say, it goes to the third section now, that value is going to increase to 1. And now it's looking at this third section because the last result was number 29, which is in the third dozen. Let's say it went to number 7. That value is going to now increase to a depth of 2 because it's missed that section again. And this is basically looking at how often the ball doesn't land on the same section each time. So if I just enter this in a few times, and keep in mind the depth that we've got that set to is 6. So you can see it's currently on 4. So if we just miss that section 2 more times, you're going to see that it's going to highlight orange. Now the orange one means a positive chase is what I like to call it, and that means it hasn't landed on the same section for, in this case, 6 spins in a row. Now when I've tracked countless tables, I've always found that the positive is always lower than the negative, and I have no idea why, but it just seems to do that. So that's basically the positive. So it's looking at how often the ball hasn't gone back to the same section. So obviously 17 is the second dozen, and if it landed on number 8, the positive will now move to the first dozen because it's waiting for that result to land on the same section as the previous result. I hope that makes sense. So say number 6 comes in now, that would then clear that positive out, and you can see that's gone. And it's showing that the red section hasn't come out in, if we go down here, in 6 spins as well. So this is the positive and the negative tracking. And as I mentioned with the progressions, you'll see here, most people tend to stick to the minimal progression. And when I play this, I typically ignore the even sections and just bet on the dozens only. I find that's a lot more safer because the even bets can go quite high in monetary value, as you have to martingale, meaning you have to double your bet on every loss, whereas the dozens is a much gentler progression. So with that said, that's pretty much how this tool works. You can adjust the settings to what depth you want until you start making a bet. So you might be like wanting to make a bet only when a particular section hasn't landed in 13 spins, or say 10 spins like that, and you just keep entering in the data until you see one of these fields highlight. Now because I'm on the dozens only, even if I enter black now, that red will disappear because it's not looking at the even sections, it's only looking at these dozens. And you can see, you can always track the data to see how high each section is, meaning how many spins that particular section hasn't been landed on. So you can see the first dozen hasn't been landed on in 1 spin, the third dozen hasn't been landed on in 4 spins, and the top row hasn't been landed in 1 spin, bottom row 4 spins, 19 through 36 in 4 spins, red hasn't been landed on in 7 spins, and so on. We've also got the spin statistics here. Now this is a really useful tool to have just in itself, because if you track and get lots of spin data from a particular table and then copy that out, then go to the bottom of the calculator here, you can paste all of that data in, and then once you select a number, let's just say 0, it's going to load all of that data which you've entered in here, and it's going to show you the spin statistics, how many times each number has been landed on in however many spins you want to enter. In this case, there's 1,956 spins, and you can see number 1 has been landed on 40 times, number 2 has been landed on in 60 times, and you can also see the percentage of that. And this is generally looking for the Garcia system. There was a family called the Garcia family, and they looked at a wheel bias. So if there's any defect or damage on a roulette wheel, they found that particular numbers would get landed on more often than not over thousands and thousands of spins. Now I'm going to level with you and be honest, it is very rare to find a table bias anymore, because all of the roulette tables will be monitored by computers, and if there ever is a wheel bias, the computer will probably alert the casino, and then they will get the roulette wheel changed or repaired. But this is good for live casinos and some of the older establishments. But it's very, very interesting to do. And also, collecting the data is always fun to test your own roulette strategies as well. So we've included that on there, and it's very good for analyzing mass amounts of spin data. That brings me back to what we are going to add in soon. So if you go to Table Insight, this is only available on the auto tracking. This is automatically tracking all of these roulette tables. Okay, these are the main roulette tables, and if you go to the auto tracking tables, it will show you the gaming provider as well. But this is the Table Insights. So we've got American Roulette, 888, 777, Ruby, a whole bunch, and it will currently show you the current dealer's name, who's on that table at the moment, how many players is on the table at the moment, and it will also show you the last numbers. Now I'm working with my developer, and I want to add a section here where it will keep track of the table results for the last 24 hours, the last 3 days, the last 7 days, and all time. So it will keep every spin record for the table throughout the history. So you'll be able to download, say you wanted to download 3 days worth of data, then you could go into the positive negative calculator, submit that data, and then have a look at all of the statistics. And also you can use it for your own betting strategies if you want to run some sort of simulator with a particular strategy. So it's going to be really, really useful. Now we have got the auto tracking tables as well, and I want to talk about how this particular tool works with the auto tracking tables. So let's, for speed's sake, let's go to Speed Roulette, and I would set the positive and negative calculator. Now on Safari it typically blocks the pop-up for the first time, but if you click that, it will then open that table. So we can see that the table is Speed Roulette, the dealer's name is Maya, and there's 151 players on this, and you'll see that this will update. It says 3 hours, but this is the first spin, so you're going to see a lot of this data will change because it's looking at the previous dealer right now. So as soon as the next result has landed, this tool will update. And this is, oh, actually I've got auto tracking disabled. I was on there before, so I've enabled the auto tracking. So that basically means that it is now auto tracking this table. So there you go, you can see it is Mayor on the table still. There's 202 players, and apparently it's been on 3 hours. That should update. But here's the thing, once there is a dealer change, the data will get wiped. Okay, so all of the data from this recent numbers and from this section here and from the spin statistics will get wiped on a dealer change. You can stop that from happening by just selecting this tab here, which says refresh on dealer change. So if you disable that, once a dealer changes, that data will continue logging. Okay, so it won't remove any of the data, it will just keep it going. For most tools you want to always refresh on a dealer change because we're looking at the dealer's spin patterns, whereas this calculator is looking at the dozens and columns, which doesn't really have any merit when tracking dealers. I personally believe that this tool is best used on auto and air-powered tables over thousands and thousands of spins, which is why I've added that on to refresh on dealer change. so you can disable that. We've also got the option to disable auto tracking, so you can see here it's automatically tracking this particular table. If you disable auto tracking, you can then manually submit data. So let me just do that. If I disable that, you will see that this box appears as well, which says undo last entry. If auto tracking's on, you don't have that option to remove the last data, and also you can click on here as much as you want and it won't update. Okay, you can only select the numbers once auto tracking is disabled. So that's how the auto tracker works, and I just wanted to touch on these settings here. Now, as I was mentioning earlier, the positive tracking for the dozens and columns displays on a monetary value. So for example, let's set the starting bet to 0.20, so we're doing 20 cents on each bet. Okay, and I'm going to drop the depths of these a little bit lower just so that we can see some data updating on this particular table. Okay, you can see the second dozen in the top row, so we'll probably get quite a few things highlighting on the next result. And I just want to talk to you about the betting progression and the difference between the positive and the negative. Okay, so you can see here we are currently set to evens and dozens with minimal progression. So that's now going to tell you to bet 1 unit. Now 1 unit in our case is 20 cents. Okay, so the negative tracking, it shows you how many units you would be betting. So your unit size is 50 cents, you would bet 1 unit. Now the positive, which is there, that will show you the monetary value. So you can see here, location first 12, bet number 1, the amount you should bet is 20 cents because that's what you've set here. Okay, so the positive tracking, which is this section and this section, you would be betting the monetary amount. On the negative, you would just be betting the unit size. So in this case, 1 unit, which would be 20 cents. So I'm just going to wait for the next result to come in and see what happens. So there you go. The positive has now been cleared out because it went back to the same section. Number 9 is in the first dozen, and number 3 went back to the first dozen. Sorry. So now you can see here it's saying on the third dozen you should be betting 1 unit. On the middle row you should be betting 2 units. So that would be 40 cents because the unit size is 20. So remember, this negative tracking area, the amount is in unit size, and in the positive tracking it's the monetary amount. Okay, so it will say 20, then 40, 60, 80, 120, and so on. So you can see here now, this is a depth of 4 on the third dozen and a depth of 5 on the middle row, meaning this middle row hasn't been landed on in 5 spins, and this third dozen hasn't been landed on in 4 spins. So I hope this all makes sense to you. Once you play around with it, it's if you do get the auto tracking membership, you get access to obviously all the manual trackers, which is good to play around on, and the auto tracking, which does all of the data submission for you. And that means you can open as many tables as you like to track and then skip between the tabs to find the best table for you. But I just wanted to give you a big rundown on exactly what the positive negative calculator does and how it all works on here. Okay, so that's essentially it. You can always check the depths here manually, so you can see the third dozen hasn't been landed on in 5 spins, and you want to adjust. I've got this set way too low. I'm telling it to highlight on a depth of 3, which is very low. For me personally, I would be betting a minimum of a depth of 6 or 7. Okay, so you'd be waiting for a section to not land in 6 or 7 spins. You can set that higher. I've set that, I think, to a depth of 12 or 14 when I was doing higher stakes. So I was starting with like £10 per section. So yeah, keep that in mind. It's all about trial and error. So you can see just on the recent spins that we've had at the moment, the deepest dozens, meaning the first, second and third dozen, bottom, middle and top, has never gone past a depth of 6, and that's for all of these. Okay, the deepest 50-50, which is the 1 to 18, even, red, black, odd, 19 to 36, that hasn't gone past a depth of 4, meaning it hasn't missed one of those for 4 spins in a row. And then this is the positive dozens, hasn't gone past a depth of 4, and the positive columns hasn't gone past a depth of 3. So this is a really useful information, and what you should do is, like I said, track an auto table for maybe an hour or 2 hours, and then just have a look at this information here. Then you can adjust your settings accordingly. So the deepest does, in this case, it's at a depth of 6. So what I would do, I would go and set that to maybe a depth of 5, depth of 4 or 5. And then what that's going to do, it won't highlight. So the top row and the red, you'll see that they will highlight unless it comes in now, which they both did. So number 9 was the top row, and also that was the red as well. So they both came in one go. So now they will go back to 0, and it will start tracking again. So yeah, these settings are really important. Make sure that you pay attention to them, and obviously don't set them too low, like a depth of 3 is too low. Have them high, and you don't have to bet money. Just watch what happens and analyze it and pretend that you're making the bets, because it will show you how much you would be betting, so you can give this a dry run yourself. But anyway, this is the walkthrough of the positive negative calculator for both the manual tracking and the auto tracking tables. I hope you enjoy it. If you do have any questions, please drop your comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. Take care, and as always, please bet smart.